What's going on, folks? One of my favorite guests, Chad O. Jackson, is back to the show to have a long-form, in-depth conversation about some deeper diving issues when it comes to politics and culture that may not get as many clicks as the top headlines, but I guarantee this conversation will be way more thorough and helpful to navigate the wild web of confusion that the mainstream media and politicians constantly try to trap us in. I'm excited to bring you guys this chat. Dream Rare Podcast starts now. It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Dream Rare Podcast. I'm here with Chad O. Jackson. What's going on, Chad?
Hey, An0maly. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, no problem. I was thinking about going over a news headline real quick and then having a chat with Chad, but I was like, I don't even feel like talking about a random news clip I don't care about that much. I wanted to get into a topic he was talking about, which was political manipulation and the middle ground. Like, of course, not everybody likes Trump or hates Biden or likes Biden. Most people don't even pay attention to politics, and they're kind of just going along with whatever culture can trick them into. And I thought Chad had a really interesting angle on it. So the floor is yours, Chad. And I want to say real quick, I went back to our MLK conversation, and the top comment said, wow, An0maly's getting better because he lets his guests talk. So I think people's favorite part of that conversation was the fact that I allowed you to talk and I shut up. So whenever I have a guest on like that and they're in the zone, never cut off. So the floor is yours. And thanks for being here. Tell us about what you think.
Well, I mean, you don't have the number of followers that you have for shutting up. That's for sure. So your voice is definitely needed. So I've been thinking a lot about, apoliticism, because I've noticed that a lot of pundits use apoliticism in a very kind of romantic way. You know what I mean? They talk about the apolitical subsect of our society as if this is a noble thing to be, or a noble place, or a noble way of thinking, when the reality is it's not actually all that noble as far as I'm concerned. To me, apoliticism is the decision that one makes in terms of opting to not have an opinion on the question of what kind of country should we be, what kind of people should we be. It's choosing to defer to the expert class. It's choosing to allow for the social engineers and the global elites to kind of run amok. And, I've been thinking a lot about that, because when it comes to the so-called, middle, which I think there is no such thing as a middle. I think that that's a myth. I think the reality is a lot of people are just unbiased consumers of culture, unbiased consumers of what comes through the television screens or what they see on the internet or what have you. They just consume it in a kind of unbiased way. That's what's really going on. To be truly involved civically requires being interested in what's going on in our country, what's going on in our world. And far too many people have no interest in that. They'd rather just focus on that which is necessary for their day-to-day living, and whatever their interests are, whatever their vices. That's the only thing that people are genuinely concerned about. And so they don't really control the temperature in the room. And again, there's a lot to be said here. But again, I've been focusing a lot just on what is apoliticism. Is this a virtuous thing? Or will apoliticism be the death of America? I think it's the latter.
When it comes to not paying attention, do you think it's a natural thing that's always existed, and now in this world, not everybody considers themselves the best leader or maybe the highest intellect in that field, and they just see themselves as, you know what, that's not my lane, or maybe it's too stressful, or they don't feel like getting there? Do you think that that's natural, that some people just don't gravitate towards it, or do you think it's more of a modern thing and a trick from schools, media, et cetera, whoever's doing it? Because back in the day, it was just common sense that every man would pay attention. Every man would be involved. Taxes, it's a way, it's affecting your, income, family. So why wouldn't you pay attention? Were there always people, as far as you know, in history that just didn't care? Like, say 50% of the country didn't care? Or is that a brand new Americana, Uber Eats, cell phone, era lifestyle?
I think that there's a lot going on, because you have to take into consideration the fact that throughout human history, there has been different kinds of governments. There's been different kind of relationships between the people and their government. And what we are experiencing here in the United States is a fairly new phenomenon over the past 3 centuries. Um, since the the Enlightenment in France, there has been a lot of changes in the way that we think about our relationship to our government. We live in what's called a republic, where we're not peasants or serfs, but it's interesting to see how we're kind of getting back to a place where we do have a kind of peasant monarchical relationship dynamic between us and our government. And we're doing so not by the force of the gun, but rather we're doing so voluntarily because we're so easily duped and manipulated and tricked by various movements, be they social justice movements, be they pandemics and epidemics, and so on and so forth. We are constantly relinquishing our rights as citizens to our government. And in so doing, we're getting right back to the place or the position or the posture of peasant.
Mm.
And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Since we can acknowledge that, the question we must then ask is apoliticism as virtuous as a lot of the pundits make it out to be? And to qualify what I'm saying with regard to, the pundits, thinking or saying that apoliticism is virtuous, they do this by comparatively saying that those of us who do care about politics are obsessed by it, whereas apolitical people are more simple and they just kind of go with the flow, and that's a good thing. That's something to behold. So while they, and by they I mean particularly people on the left, while they promote apoliticism, they're not truly promoting apoliticism in the truest sense of the word. I think when people think of apoliticism, they think of someone who is not involved in politics, even to the extent that they don't vote. They want you to vote. It's not a matter of not wanting you to vote. It's really a matter of not wanting you to be opinionated, not wanting you to apply value or tradition to how you utilize your voice in terms of where you think we should go, the direction you think we should go in this country. It's this idea, once again, of deferring to the expert class, which leads me to the next thing where it's important to ask, well, who is the expert class and what is it that they believe? What is it that they're trying to do? What direction is it that they're trying to wish or to take us? And the answer to that question is, well, I'll start with saying that, what it is they believe. They are very anti-Christian. And from there, they're anti-masculinity, they're anti, virtuous womanhood, they're anti-nuclear family, they're anti really all the relics of what the Bible promotes. And I understand that not everybody's a Christian, but it's important to, for the sake of a civilized country, it's important to have some code of ethics, some kind of objective code of ethics that that governs the people for the sake of peace, structure, stability in the land. You have this in Islamic countries. You have this. You have this once upon a time in the United States, but we've gotten away from that. We removed God from our public square at the behest of the expert class. You saw this with the monkey trials, the Scopes trials in the 1920s, where the argument was over whether or not evolution should be taught in schools. You saw this in the 1960s, where the Supreme Court ruled that prayer, it's illegal to pray in school and all the things. So we have actively been pursuing a Western civilization without the recognition of God, and therefore without a recognition of objective order. We've become a more fluid society. We've become a more secular society where anything goes. And I feel like a lot of this has lulled the general public to sleep to the extent where we are apolitical in that we believe that it's in a sense intolerant or evil or wicked to speak on behalf of anything objective, anything good. And I know I'm all over the place, but yeah.
Now you're flowing. And to tie that all together, I think that exactly the argument you're making can be seen as far as apoliticism. Obviously both sides can be tricked, but back in the day and even in the 70s, 80s, 90s, people really valued their freedom and liberty because
Mhm.
maybe their ancestors or they had lived through something where they had seen the opposite. So they understood how important the First Amendment was and the Second Amendment was. And these are not perfect things, but they have the right to vote. They own land. They, can speak freely against the government. Many people came from governments where you couldn't do that. So everybody actually cared. And even though there was a debate, a political debate about how much welfare to give this or that, there was this sense of understanding of what it meant to be an American and why it was valuable over the world. And now that everyone's apolitical, the group of people who cares about that shrunk. I would guess that a Kennedy Democrat would probably have cared about freedom of speech. And if anyone ran on the opposition of that, they wouldn't even get 10% of the vote. But now you can have people that run like John Fetterman that can't speak, or Joe Biden that can't stand up straight, and people that are literally telling you they're going to take stuff away from you. They're running
Right.
on the policy. In 2020, I voted for Trump. There's many reasons that I could attribute, but really the main one, if I could put one above, was I knew that on a federal level, he probably wouldn't force mandate vaccinations, and
Mhm.
Biden would. And that's a crazy lack of freedom that is very important to me for nurses, for military, for myself if I needed to travel. So, but this happens because people are apolitical, and I
Right.
wanted to throw something into the mix. When you're talking about the apolitical people is swooped up by the left, and they're not political yet they still vote and they still think that culture isn't political when it is. The George Floyd riots were the perfect narrative for that, where even though the mayor was a Democrat, there were Democrats all over everything to do with that city. But somehow the narrative to apolitical people was this is racist.
Mhm.
Trump's the racist and the right's the more racist party. So it led tens of millions of people and voters into the hands of Democrats, and they don't even necessarily know why, because they're not normally tapping into politics. They're just tapping into culture without knowing that they're intertwined.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when it comes to Democrats versus Republicans, um, both of them are contending for the mythological middle. Um, I think that the left is doing so cautiously, whereas the right is doing so kind of unconsciously. The right is more reactionary than they are offensive. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
again, in order to win over the apolitical, you have to be offensive. You have to go on the offense. Um, the right, the way that they play defense is by resorting to reactionaryism. You have to play defense by playing offense when it comes to politics. Not always, but oftentimes. If you're reacting to something, it's already too late. If you're reacting to something that's already in motion, you have to
mm,
understand that the left, they already have the infrastructure. They already have the talking heads. They already have the celebrity class. They already have the expert class. They already have academia. They already have primary and secondary education. They have strategic placement. And by the time a thing is in motion, when those on the right are reacting to it, it's already too late. When
mm,
you look at, for example, the LGBT so-called movement and trans and all this other nonsense, this isn't something that just sprung up out of nowhere. This has been years in the making. You can find gay liberation literature dating as far back as the 1960s in, from there, the 1920s, where they talked about blurring the lines between the sexes, where they talked about rewiring the man and emasculating the man. Because to the extent, the philosophy behind it is, if you, in a sense, neuter the man, if you take away his manhood, as it were, um, then that kind of makes it open season for the rest of society, wherein you can bring the expert class to play that kind of paternal and masculine role in society. You want to take away individuality. And this is something that Christianity offers. The Bible says things like, if a man doesn't work, does not eat. Connoted in that is this notion that, well, if a man's family is going to eat, it's on him to get out there and work. It's on him to be the breadwinner, to hunt, to gather, to do all the things to make sure that his family is provided for. when you take away that inclination to be a man from the man, who then is going to provide for that family? In comes the government. And to the question of, well, why would anybody want to neuter the man? Why would anybody want to emasculate the man and put that burden on the government? The government has enough to deal with. Well, it's all about power. And that's what these people want. They want power. And when it comes to power, the more people you have under your power, the better. And that's really what it boils down to. And so, again, to go back to the point that you made about George Floyd and about, this, I guess, the morals of the middle. The morals of the middle are not a organic thing. The morals of the middle is definitely faux. It's what's the word? It's fabricated. It's made in a Hollywood basement, so to speak. Those are the morals of the middle. And again, it goes back to the left understanding this very early on, that if we want to get people to go along with what it is we're trying to push, we must posture ourselves as the party, as the entity, as the faction who stands on the side of that which is moderate, that which is common sense, that which is good, and that which is true. And we must at the same time take ownership of the main stage, of the public square. We must play the gatekeepers of narrative, of definitions, and with that posture, frame our political adversaries as being fascists and racists and bigots and so on and so forth. And so they posture themselves as the common sense folks, and they frame their adversaries as the fascists. And so it gets to a point where, because they are able to, with these positions of influence, frame the narrative, define the morals and the ethics and so on and so forth, the public, because they go to your schools, because they consume your media, because they listen to your music, because they watch your news, they adopt these things as unquestionable, as the norm. And to the extent that your political adversaries speak out in a reactionary way, it validates in the minds of the public the claims of bigot, of racist, of so on and so forth. Why are you trying to stall progress? Why are you trying to get in the way of liberation and the things that I'm told and taught and am conditioned to believe will help liberate all of us? And so again, because the left is very involved in defining the terms of conditions, and the right is so busy trying to play catch up, or they merely divert to or resolve to just be reactionaries. And again, it's not so much about what your basis is concerned with, as much as it is with what the spectator is concerned with. And the spectator is an apolitical middle.
Right. Let's look at the music industry in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. Every artist, doesn't matter, black, white, whatever, their music was more wholesome. And the people that were rebel rousers, their idea of being a rebel rouser was just barely anything compared to music today. Then you had, the hippie movement, then rock and roll. And now you have like demon rappers and pill rappers and women talking about their coochies in every song. Like that's the main thing they talk about. And now the culture shifts in that direction, and it seems natural. Like someone said in the comments, which I understand it's true, is most people are conservative fiscally, but they're liberal socially. What me and Chad are suggesting, or maybe even just putting out there for consideration, is that this isn't natural. What's considered socially liberal isn't what was considered liberal 30 years ago. The liberals having fun in the 60s, it's not like now, and that's done. So the left controls the music. The average it goes so far left, and then people just assume that that's the average when that has been manipulated to be the average, and that's why they win. And I wanted to say, with the conservatives playing catch up all the time, sometimes I get misconstrued on my channel because I'm kind of railing at conservatives and Republicans harder than liberals. It's not because I think they're worse. It's because I feel like the whole party's controlled opposition at this point. Like you said, if they can move the ball 50 yards and then you just react to the 50 yards, and then they move it 10 more yards and you react and you move it 10 more yards, and then you take a step back and say you're conserving it, you're basically just controlled opposition, guaranteeing that Christians, conservatives, whoever, never get anything or never win anything, because you're just kind of a placeholder. But this type of conversation is not going to be as popular as someone screaming hysterically about the 2020 election or, some other stuff. And outside of what politicians are doing, I like Ronna McDaniel, for example. She's the head of the RNC, who is really backed by Trump. He said nice things about her in the Sebastian Gorka interview. Some people don't like her, obviously, in the base, but she keeps winning. She's there. Long story short, she'll say Happy Pride Month. And it's like, well, I'm not for that, but I'm going to celebrate a whole month around, rainbow flags and sodomy, because that's the principled conservative thing to do. And I'm not saying to go out and hate on anybody or say anything, but to me, it would, like, that's so, I don't know. We're going to spend a whole month celebrating sexuality. Like, just on its front, it's very bizarre, not natural, normal. It's definitely not American historical. And that's what the Republican Party does. They're basically just placeholders to make you swallow the slippery slope, and, make sure that anybody who ever says anything that goes further in an accurate sense is deemed the same thing the left would call you. Maybe they'll call you a bigot or an sexist or an anti-Semite, or, you're going too far on that topic. Will we have the log cabin Republicans? And it's very bizarre watching it all unfold like that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, the road on which we're on is not a sustainable one at all. When you look at what's going on with the WEF and with the other kind of global elites and in terms of their plans, when you look at AI, which I do think that there is some good to AI, but when you look at the nefarious ways in which it can be used and which it is sure to be used, when you look at proxy wars going on all over the world, and then you juxtapose that to the overwhelming ignorance of Westerners, of Americans in particular, I don't see how much of what we have going on in terms of this slow kind of peace season that we see, where everybody is walking around, they still get to buy their lattes and go to the movies and all the things. Like, I don't know how much more sustainable this will be. We are on autopilot, so to speak. And as I said before, the ethics and the morals with which we operate are not sustainable. Like, the logical conclusion is demise and destruction. It just is. And the question then becomes, once people get to the point where they're beyond repair because they lack the spiritual maturity, the emotional maturity, the physical maturity to take care of themselves, you will get to a point where you need someone to take care of you. And the question then becomes, what is the ethics? What is the agenda? What is the beliefs of these individuals who will be prime and ready to take control of the mantle, who will be primed and ready to take control of the will? These aren't things that we are thinking about because we believe that such a thing can never happen. And we have a sorely lacking understanding of our own history, not only our own history, but the history of the world. Every empire has fallen, you know what I mean? And so we think that because we have grown up in the 20th century or 21st century for those Gen Zers, Western world, and we've never actually seen real atrocity, we don't think it can ever come to our doorstep. And I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I'm not trying to be an alarmist, so to speak. But again, self-sustainability requires resolving to educate yourself, working out, drinking water, not being easily duped and deceived by these politicians and activists who I think in many ways are just as bad as the politicians, if not worse. I feel that I am a kind of lone voice, kind of shouting in the wilderness into this vast and deep kind of void of emptiness, because it's like people are just going to continue to be apolitical or just kind of go for or continue believing something that they've been conditioned to believe well over a century.
when it comes to being apolitical and the left kind of swooping them up through culture, school, like they move the goalpost left and then the right reacts. And I see this as well. Sometimes the reaction is super upset because they're really mad at what's going on in the schools with their kids. They're really
Mhm.
mad that the propaganda is getting pushed. And I understand that. And I'm not saying it's acceptable. It's gone way too far. I guess how I see it is similar to what you said before. It went too far because it's been happening for decades, perhaps even a century in some
Mhm.
ways, and nobody recognized it until now. So I don't see the right necessarily as this massive victim as they see themselves, like, oh, we don't deserve this. We did all the right things. You actually didn't, though. And in my opinion, that's why Trump's kind of gaining more leverage now, because he's telling people, like, you're not really responsible for anything. We're the victims of the election. We're the
Yeah.
victims of the left. We're the victims of the deep state. We're the victims of whoever. And, it's not our fault at all. And if you vote for me, I'll make it better. Even in the comments, I don't want to be distracted because we're having a great combo, but I see people, we haven't even mentioned politicians yet. And people are like, Carrie Lake will make the best vice president, you snowflake. And it's like, we're having a total, like, 5-layer deeper conversation about psychology, philosophy, and people still can't even communicate without defaulting back to like a certain brand where it's so much deeper than that. I guess what I want to kick back to you is, I think that the left controls the culture.
Mhm.
They've sent it far left. I think that they get the apolitical people. I think it's bad to not pay attention because, like you said, then you're just going to walk in the herd and it's not going to go the right way. And then I see it as the left is confused and lost. The apolitical people don't know what's going on and they don't even care about the Constitution. And then you have the right, which is obviously fractured now, but you have, tens of millions of people that really can't think straight anymore, have any sort of thought process without defaulting back to a guy, a catchphrase,
Mhm.
a group of people that they're not really critically thinking about. Where does that come into play in the next 5-10 years? Where do you see all this ending? And is it better to be that person but understand the First Amendment's important? Probably.
Yeah. That's a very good question. Again, to the question of where do I see it going in the next 15 or 20 years? Whenever the WEF says you'll own nothing and be happy by 2030, I believe them. I believe them. Whenever Gavin Newsom takes the podium after California decides to keep him as their governor, and he says things like, you didn't only say no to ousting me as your governor. There's a lot of things that you said yes to, says Gavin Newsom. He says you said yes to social justice. He said you said yes to environmental justice. He said that you said yes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You said yes to LGBT. He said you said yes to a woman, having the right to abort her baby. And he said that, and get this, he said these aren't only Californian values; these are American values. And a lot of Republicans were like, oh, how dare he say that? But the reality is he's telling the truth. These are American values to the extent that most Americans are apolitical and they take the values that are assumed to be the universal kind of common knowledge values. Again, it comes down to who controls the flow of information, who controls the narrative, who controls the definitions. A lot of your Republicans use definitions that are straight out of the leftist playbook. A
Mm,
lot of us use definitions that are straight out of Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. The word capitalism is a communist word, but you have a lot of Republicans walking around saying that they're capitalists. And again, the reason I went this direction in terms of explaining that, look, we are using their definitions. Like basically, we're playing the rules. We're playing the game by the rules that they've established. And so, really, the only answer, like, we can't turn the tide of the inevitable. Like, again, it's this mammoth thing is in motion. It's a runaway train, and you have to convince. And Yuri Bev tried to convince people in 1984 whenever he sat down with G. Edward Griffin and tried to warn them. He even went to the CIA, and the CIA laughed him out of court. He died driving I think it was a milk truck or a mail truck, alone. And so this is the fate of individuals who try to sound the alarm. And so again, I'm not trying to sound like a defeatist. To the extent that I am an American citizen, I have the right to use my voice and vote and do the things, I'm going to do so. Because as a Christian, I believe what the Bible says in terms of, God sends out his word, it establishes or it accomplishes what he seeks for it to accomplish. And when it returns to him, it doesn't return to him void. And so whether it's one person who's listening to me with discernment or 2,000 people who are listening to me with discernment, I'm going to continue to use my voice in the way that I see fit. Hopefully judging rightly along the way. However, I have no disillusions about this fake notion that a lot of Republicans have that we're going to win back the control of the government and we're going to get everything back to its constitutional roots. That's not going to happen because it requires numbers. There's strength in numbers, and the psyche, the collective IQ of society is so low to, in many ways, it's beyond repair. And so I feel like some of the things that we need to be looking at are things that are within our control. That is taking care of ourselves, taking care of our health, learning things that we don't know, whether it be music, gardening, off-grid living. I'm not saying that we should become, doomsday preppers, but we should learn how to take care of ourselves, regardless of if things go awry or things stay the way they are. To the ability to know how to take care of yourself to the extent that you don't have to always depend on a grocery store that's huge. Anyway, so I feel like there's a lot we can be doing, and the most important thing is our kids. You mentioned the schools and the things that are going on in the schools, and there are a lot of Republicans that are upset about what's going on in the schools. Republicans who have children, and for me, I don't know how to feel about that because there are other options apart from the public schools. I feel like the issue isn't so much what the schools are teaching. The issue is that the schools are centralized in the first place. Mm-hmm. The objective should be to decentralize the public schools. That should be what the objective is. Again, this requires going on the offense rather than being on the defense and doing so with a reactionary posture. And so we're too busy playing defense and we're too busy being reactionaries to the extent where we're not having the kind of grown-up conversations like you and I are having now, where we figure out like, okay, so how do we cut the get to the jugular and go on the offense in terms of amassing a movement to decentralize the schools? We're not willing to have these kinds of conversations.
My favorite analogy that I thought of was like, I feel like Republicans often hit at the leaves of a tree and they're like, we're going to knock down the tree, and then the leaves keep growing back. And it's like, you got to cut it from the bottom. If you're just taking the leaves off all the time, you don't understand how the tree works. It grows them. You know what I'm saying? The acorns are going to fall next year too. You can't just pick up the acorns and say you got rid of the acorns. You got to cut it by the bottom. But when you say that, people freak out at you because it requires a deeper level of understanding than just yelling Trump, MAGA, or fighting over DeCimp or whatever people are doing nowadays. And they get so mad at me. And, I agree with the numbers game, like Hunter Biden's laptop. The reason nothing gets done is because not enough people care. It hasn't reached critical mass. Conservatives care, libertarians care, Jimmy Dore cares, and Glenn Greenwald cares, but it hasn't broken culture to the point where so many people care that something gets done. And that's the truth. And Republicans are cowards when they're in office and they do the agenda of the left. And then when Democrats get power, they actually use their power. And then Republicans play the victim. But in general, we do need to build numbers. One thing that I feel like the whole Republican movement now, in my view, is pretty much controlled opposition. That's just how I feel from like a philosophical standpoint, because you now have Trump as the leading figure who's telling people basically, we don't really need to do that much more. I'm going to play a clip later, but he says like, we don't need the votes. I got the votes. You don't need to help me. And it's like, what type of campaign is that? And I talk to people, and I'm not just blaming him, but I talk to people in my movement and I'm like, hey, here's what we have to do. But they've been brainwashed with so much victim mentality. They don't think they have to get suburban vote. Like there's people like Carrie Lake that are gaining prominence on Twitter saying, retweeting things that say that California was won, and there's a case to be made that Republicans really won all 50 states. While she's being hailed as a hero, to me, that's brainwashing conservatives into thinking that you don't have to win over the cities like they did in Miami and flip the votes. You don't have to get to the youth. You don't have to get to the suburban voters. You don't have to get to the elderly who watch CNN. You don't have to change culture. You don't have to make music. You don't have to change the schools. You don't have to do any of that because we're already popular. Everyone already likes us, even though we all know that that's not true on every level of society. So I see these people almost as controlled opposition now, where they're tricking conservatives into, first of all, just giving their money, fortune, and fundraising to them, but also in return, this idea that they don't have to do what's more critical than politics, which is win the culture and get enough people on your side and not just talk and milk dry the base that already agrees with you. It's a strategy that's freaking people out when I'm like, what's your message to these people? Oh, we don't have to do it. Who cares? Who cares? You don't want to get more people. No, we don't care because it's stolen anyway. It's stolen. Then why are you running? Because I want to win. How are you going to win if it's stolen? Well, because there's layers to the cake. It's 15 things at once. You got to campaign. You got to watch this. You got to do that. If you really thought there was no chance, you wouldn't be running or talking about Trump or DeSantis. So it's like, I feel like as bad as the left has gotten and as bad as the society has gotten, it's almost like a game where if you're playing a good team, you get better all the time. But if you're playing a bad team, you get weaker. The right's so busy playing the left. And because the left is so stupid now, they've actually lowered the IQ of the right. And it's like a child fight now. And I see that as a real problem when conservatives don't think they actually have to turn the tides of public perception, where I think it's the most important thing.
100%. Like I would pose a question to Republicans, and that is, when those who are apolitical, when they see you, when you're talking about, the run-of-the-mill Republican talking points, when they see you, do they see what it is you're saying and taking that in good faith, or do they see the way in which your political adversaries have framed you? And if you're willing to answer that question honestly, you'll realize that when people hear you, when the apolitical people hear you talk, they don't see, what you're saying and are taking it and dissecting it and reflecting on it. No, what they see is the way in which they have been conditioned to believe you are. That is a fascist, a bigot, a racist, and all the things. That's what they see. And so the question then becomes, once again, how is it that you get at the head of it? How is it that you kind of march to the beat of your own drum and go on the offense? Go on the offense, not only in terms of exposing the left, but go on the offense in terms of glamorizing your own ideas, glamorizing your own values and views, making better movies, making better music that are reflective of wholesome traditional values. If you're not willing to do that, if all you're willing to do is to get on the internet and complain about Drag Queen Story Hour, you're losing, and you're going to lose, and you deserve to lose. You're a failure. And people need to tell you that you're a failure. For me, again, the reason why I'm into filmmaking and the reason why I have a company and the reason why I write and do all the things I do is because I want to make good stuff that are reflective of my values, in hopes that when people read it or watch it or see it, it causes them to think. And once they are able to think, they're able to let up their guard to the extent where it's unpenetrable by the social demagogues who wish to enslave them.
Mm-hmm.
Are we thinking in those terms, or are we just interested in the squirrel that's running up the tree?
Right. When I first realized Trump wasn't that bad, which, to be honest, I don't think I publicly said anything, but I knew before he was inaugurated. I just got the gist. I'm like, all right, the media sucks. They hate him. He's not that bad, as bad as the left is saying. When I made my first video, what people don't understand now, because I'm also like having the same energy with both sides and it freaks them out. When I defended Trump, when I supported Trump, when I made videos that got lots of views, getting people to like Trump, getting emails every day. I was a Democrat. Now I like Trump. I used to watch CNN. Now I watch Fox News. I probably helped millions of people wake up out of this reality. The way I did it, even when I liked Trump more, was by getting out of the bubble. I didn't just say Trump is great, you suck. Trump's great, you suck, MAGA, build a wall. Nobody wants to hear that. That's apolitical or left-leaning. I did it with compassion and thoughtfulness and said, how do I get this message without caving, without pretending to be someone I'm not? I'm not telling you to be fake. I'm just being thoughtful. I don't need to talk to my uncles who agree with me. They already agree with me. I need to get people who don't understand this to understand this so we could shift culture. And that's how I did it for my entire career. Is like, how do I get this message to the left? How do I get this message to gain, now that I'm saying the same sort of thing to Trump because I feel like he's losing that edge? People get upset. They're like, we don't need, like, Trump got asked about suburban voters and he just started talking about the election. Like, this is literally his mindset and everyone's mindset is we don't have to do anything. We don't have to reach anybody. We don't have to make an appeal. Just be annoying, say the same 5 things on loop, and tell people to go touch grass if they don't like it. I want to play this clip real quick because ballot harvesting is legal in a lot of Democrat states. It's legal. It's been done by Republicans in California to win elections, because if the left is going to make these things legal and it's allowed, you have to figure out how they're using it to their advantage and gain the edge too. So obviously Ron DeSantis wants to ballot harvest where it's legal. Every Republican has already done it to success. And Donald Trump doesn't want to do it, but he's telling people, I don't need your help. I don't need your help. We got all the votes we need. What a crazy campaign message. I'm going to play it, react real quick, and then I want to get your take.
I even tell people, you don't have to help me at all. I have all the votes we need. We have so many votes. We have a landslide.
So he's like, I just tell people, you don't even need to help me at all. I got all the votes already. This is not a good campaign message. It's not only a bad campaign message, it's a terrible psychological, like, message to his base of like, no, don't do. He's the opposite of what me and Chad are talking. And I'm not saying he's never done anything good. I voted for him. I liked him. I'm just saying psychologically where we need to go as a culture and a country, giving people this message of like, I don't even need your help is insane to me. And it's making me feel like the whole party's controlled opposition, and everything that's going on, every fake fight between Trump and DeSantis, every influencer yelling at each other, every person crying, it just makes me feel like that's the big distraction. It's like the left strategically has taken over society, and the right is going to call DeSantis a meatball for a year.
100%. So when it comes to primary elections, primary politics, what it boils down to is convention maneuvering, and using that to your advantage, being very strategic in county to county, state to state, in terms of how you're going to convince people that you're the better candidate. When you look at, for example, the primary election nomination rather, of Abraham Lincoln. Here was a candidate who was relatively unknown. He was going up against senators who were famous and were renowned, not only in America, but around the world. And he was able to strike deals, and he was able to move in such a way that he was able to get that nomination. And he ended up selecting a lot of these people who were his rivals to serve on his cabinet. And this is where the term team of rivals comes from. Ted Cruz attempted to do something similar in the 2016 election, although he failed because the popularity of Trump was so overwhelming that, even with his political savviness, Ted Cruz was unable to pull it off. Although he did stick around until the day of the convention, where he told people to vote your conscience, which was a kind of slap to Trump in a lot of people's eyes, because he didn't outright say, go vote for Trump. In any event, with all that being said, when you look at Trump and what he just said in that clip of, we don't need the help. We have it. We have it on lock. Do you think it is plausible? Although I don't think it is, but do you think it's plausible that, they already have the kind of ball in motion where they do plan on ballot harvesting? They just don't want to they don't want to say it to the general public, because to the extent that they do pull it off and win in this primary election, they want to make it look like they did it based upon the sheer popularity of Trump, more so than the fact that they were able to harvest these ballots.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One, the RNC is going to do it whether Trump says it or not. They have a lot of infrastructure, and they're not going to not do it if he says not do it. So it could be a sneaky play. I think also too, I think he's a heavy favorite in the primary. Mm-hmm. So I think that, obviously he has to worry about that first. He could be talking about that. He could, with Trump, something that I've noticed is he likes to just repeat the same thing over and over and never really adapt or learn. So he's kind of taking the stance that we don't need it. It could be for sure, but I think
Mhm.
I think he knows he'll probably win the primary, and maybe they have a plan for sure. I guess as a voter and a analyst, I'm getting Hillary vibes in the sense of like, it's mine. That
It
like
gets rubbed in the
2016
back.
was like,
Yeah.
give it to me because I'm the outsider. 2020 is like, I'm not Biden. Give it to me. I'll do better. Now it's like, it's mine. Get out of my way. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I got it on lock. I don't need your help. That's my opinion of it. But anything is
Yeah.
possible for sure.
I think Trump is well, I Trump really does kind of exhibit narcissistic tendencies, and he believes that he is owed this kind of blind loyalty from everybody, from Republicans, because of the fact that he was a good president and he did a lot of good things, and the election was stolen from him, and as such, all of the candidates who are now running, how dare you run against me? Do you not realize I'm owed this? Do you not realize that I am the savior of the Republican Party, and by extension of that, America? You should just get out of the way and kiss the ring and vote for me. Um, to me, I think it's comical to see all of the people coming out of the woodworks to support this idea, to validate this idea, in the name of MAGA, rather than understanding that the way to save the republic, if it is savable at this point, is to allow for the kind of discourse that these primaries bring about in regard to debates and so on and so forth. The fact of the matter is, a lot of the things that Trump has done over the past 3 years has been unbecoming of a sane person. It is unfortunate that that they're going after him, the swamp people in Washington, D.C. They're going after him. They are trying to throw everything that they can at him in terms of, indictments and charges and all the things. And we all know it's bogus. We all know it's bogus. The fact of the matter is, if we're going to give the same kind of treatment to any politician in Washington, D.C., you're going to find a lot more nefarious things going on with these people that make Trump look like a schoolboy, not schoolboy, but a choir. What am I trying to say? Anyway, so it's going to make Trump look like an angel compared to these people, especially people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and um, um, who's the minority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell. Like, all these people are deeply corrupt. Ted Cruz, deeply corrupt people. Um, and so of course it is a kind of buddy buddy system, and they all like to get on the House and Senate floor and pretend like there's this kind of division and contention. But the reality is, behind closed doors, it is a uniparty. It's one big uniparty that's deeply corrupt. And so again, because they want Trump out of the picture, they're throwing all this stuff at him. And so that's merited. You know what I mean? That, like, Trump's complaints against that is merited. At the same time, that doesn't automatically make him the choice that we have to get behind, because when you look at how he treated the vaccine and how he persists to this very day that he made the right decision with the vaccine, which he didn't. When you look at the fact that he passed one of the largest omnibus bills in American history. When you look at just a lot of the things that he did, they weren't conservative things, nor were they things that helped to get back to the original intent of our constitutional republic. And so, for that reason and more, I don't think he's owed anything. I think we should leave it up to the debates. We should listen intently to the conversations and to the discourse and make a decision from there, as it has always been done.
Yeah, I agree that the left is more corrupt than a lot of other Republicans, but this has been my interpretation over the last couple years, but especially the last 6 months or so. I feel like it's all a circus, in the sense of Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, the ties to them. This is something that would unravel world politics forever, right? You're talking
Mhm.
about human trafficking, child trafficking, pedophilia, on a level of blackmailing, on a level that's probably like a movie like. You know what I'm saying? You can't even
Right.
fathom it. Who's running on that platform? Is Trump running on the platform of uncovering that? Nope. Is DeSantis running on the platform of uncovering that? Nope. Is Biden going to do it? Nope. Is RFK talking about it? Nope. So who cares? It's like, is Adam Schiff more corrupt than Trump? Yes. Are Republicans going to do anything about it? Well, they didn't. Do they really care? And to wrap back to what we've been kind of talking about, because I agree with a comment where someone said, well, what about all of the ways that Joe Biden sold out? Here's the psychology of what we were trying to explain the first 30 minutes is nothing matters if the left is able to control the center and get people to not care about certain things. People will care about something that doesn't matter. But when it comes to Joe Biden, should people care? For sure. But do people care? No. And this is the of everything, because people will hear Trump on one way and freak out. The point that I'm trying to make is in order to get these things that you want, when it comes to accountability, you need to get culture to agree with you. But what a lot of people in the Trump and Republican field are doing is really just milking you dry, yet providing no value to actually get these things done, because they're just capitalizing off the chaos, but they're not telling you to cut the tree from the bottom. They're telling you to keep picking at the leaves and do what they tell you. They're using you. So when you make a video or you make a statement, if you make a MAGA statement, you're going to make millions of dollars like Carrie Lake or DC Drano, and you're going to sell a lot of stuff. And that's awesome. Great business. But the thing is, you're basically just taking this piece of the pie that you have and just running them around, and that's whatever. But, you do have to expand it. And I'm not saying they both do nothing, but sometimes people think it's virtuous to just talk and walk like Trump. And really, that is almost guaranteeing your failure for two reasons. One, when Republicans had power and he had power, nothing really happened. They didn't really hold anyone accountable. In fact, you could look at some of the people Trump pardoned, and not only did he not hold bad people accountable, he bailed some of the worst people out of jail who spied on our country, who blackmailed their brother, like crazy, crazy stuff. He didn't do it. And then when you move to this idea of, well, the way to fix it is to just act this way, walk this way, talk this way, do this, and appeal to only the people who want to hear what I'm saying, and make pretty much no effort. Even when I come through, don't say anything negative, and I say, hey, what do you guys think about, like, how I've done my whole career is trying to get this message to the people that don't already like Trump, so that actually you could sway the scales a little bit. They freak out at me. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do this. We don't need to do anything. We're earned everything. We're owed everything. He's a meatball, and just give it to us because we're going to do it. And I just think to myself, it's not just about liking or hating Trump or voting for him. It's about the Hunter Biden stuff. Nothing got done. Nothing's going to get done. It's not just the Justice Department, because when the right has the Justice Department, they don't do anything. They're lying to you. Get over it. But then also there's another way to win outside of that, which is culture. You have to get 75 to 90% of the country to care about Joe Biden's laptop or whoever, Hunter's laptop. They don't right now. And the reason they don't is because MAGA world talks to MAGA world. They sell MAGA stuff, and that's their world. They actually get upset when people reach out to try to get more people over there. Like, it bothers them if anybody just breaks the narrative. But you have to break that narrative to win over public perceptions, because every institution is in the hands of the left. And it's not just a Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light. Like, that's an easy thing to get mad at, to ignore that 99% of the country is doing far worse and has for decades. And now you just figured it out. That's my view.
Yeah. What a great summation. I don't have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's definitely on that topic. I guess while we're still here, any other final thoughts on what's going on? Because basically this conversation, obviously, when you have people like Joe Biden, he's going to come up in a conversation like this, or Donald Trump, or historical figures, because whether people like it or not, Joe Biden or whoever his handlers are is running the country right now. And Donald Trump was the last president. So these are two relevant figures, not to be overly politicized, but to fit into the conversation. And with that being said, I want your final thoughts on really what we were talking about today, how apolitical people are not virtuous. They're the easiest to trick, and they end up in a political basket, whether they know it or not. And then also how the right is kind of been reactionary. Like, any final thoughts on all that stuff?
Yeah. So when it comes once again to the social engineers, they are deeply anti-Christian, anti-man, anti-virtuous, noble, ladylike woman, anti-nuclear family, anti-literally everything good. And they preach the gospel of self-indulgence, because they understand that to the extent that you indulge in self, indulge in that which is frivolous, that which is nonsensical, that leaves you distracted enough to not pay attention to the man behind the curtain. And so that's what's going on. They subliminally push the virtue of apoliticism on the one hand and tolerance on the other. Again, apoliticism is not meant to say that you shouldn't vote. They want you to vote. They just don't want you to vote with any kind of opinion, especially if that opinion is rooted in all the things I mentioned in terms of family, in terms of, faith and so on and so forth. And then the tolerance piece is interesting because when it comes to tolerance, if you are conditioned to believe everything that the left tells you in terms of what is good and what is virtuous and what is noble, then you will then tolerate that which they tell you is good, virtuous, and noble, whether it be trans, whether it be LGBT, whether it be whatever the case may be. You'll tolerate all those things. And by extension of that, you'll not tolerate individuals who do have traditional Christian or faith values. And so actually tolerance is intolerance, where if you really think about it, Christians are some of the most tolerant people you'll come across. I'm talking about genuine Christians because they understand that the battle isn't against flesh and blood, human beings. The battle rather is against ideologies and principalities and things of that nature. And so again, I'll just land my plane by saying that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. It just is. And right now, as good of a time as any to repent, for one, and to resolve to not continue to be taken advantage by the expert class, by the social engineers who wish to use you as a pawn for their own larger, sinister game. When it comes to this upcoming election, you'll hear a lot of things from a lot of people, whether that person be DeSantis, RFK, Trump, Larry Elder, Rick Scott, Nikki Haley, the whole gamut. You'll hear a lot of things from a lot of people. I would ask people to listen to what they're saying intently with discernment and decide whether what they're saying is in keeping with a lot of the decadence and kind of globalism that we've seen already happening. Are they challenging it? Are they challenging the pedophilia, as An0maly mentioned? Are they challenging what's happening with our food and what's happening with our water and what's happening with these proxy wars? Are they challenging these things, or are they saying Democrats bad? And listen to those kinds of things and let that be your person. And that person might be an unknown as far as we're concerned right now, so to speak. But to go along with Trump just because he's a safe choice, I don't have anything against Trump personally. But again, we get the government that we deserve. And I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, and on RFK, Trump, DeSantis, one thing that, because there's so much idol worship around politicians, like the sense of if you say something about a Republican, there'll always be someone in the comments who says, oh, well, then go vote for Biden then. It's like this becomes such a polarizing fake world. But with RFK, I posted something about his take on vaccine liability, and people are like, oh, you're falling for him, huh? And I think people are projecting because they just go knee deep into every politician and they don't understand that they can also educate themselves without falling into a political campaign. But the difference between RFK than DeSantis and Trump is, no offense to DeSantis and Trump, honestly, I lean more towards their values, but RFK is an educator on big pharma. He could talk for 2 hours and educate you on 15 Monsanto court cases, on how liability works, on how Ronald Reagan passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, or how George Bush passed the PrEP Act. He's an educator in this field. And you don't have to believe everything he says, but if you listen to RFK for 2 hours, you can actually learn stuff. That's why people like him. That's why I've liked him for years before he ran for president. He wasn't even a politician to me. He's a great educator. He's, his voice is a little scratchy for obvious reasons now to people, but I like DeSantis and Trump. It's more like a campaign pitch or, here's what I'll do. They're not really educating people on topics, very rarely, if at all. So when I say this sort of stuff, people default to, oh, An0maly must be falling for every single thing he does because he said this about climate. No, I'm not. I'm just saying I have the ability to educate myself, learn, but not fall knee deep into a political campaign. And as Chad's saying, you're not the victim if Joe Biden wins. You're not the victim if Trump, everyone thinks they deserve something. Not really. This country will get the election they deserve, and they will get the candidate they deserve, not who you want. But the reality is that people aren't trying to really think about stuff. And I see that as the path it's going. And I wanted to say one more thing real quick and pass it back to you. But I forgot exactly what I was going to say. But oh yeah, about the right being super reactionary and stuff. Maybe some are thinking because it's so ugly, like let's just act wild and get power and then wield it. That's how I see them acting. Because a lot of it's real fake, irrational, and it's like, well, if the left does it, I want to do it too. I understand that's how they think they're going on offense now. To me, it's going to backfire because it seems like the left has their institutions secured and the right's trying to play 50 years of catch up. So instead of trying to like win it back, they're like freaking out and, you know, buying every overhyped thing that sounds good. To me, it's going to lead to a trap. But, you know, I guess just Game of Thrones power style. Do you think that is a valid method where it's like maybe the right understands at the high levels, like this is all going to come to an end and, you know, we're going to scoop the power up one way or the other?
That's a good question. I don't know that I know the answer to it. But that could very well be the case. Like, I did want to share with you this tweet real quick in closing. It's from Professor Pete Hotez, MD, PhD. So of course he has to put all of his acronyms in there. He says Joe Rogan wants a scientist to quote unquote debate a vaccine denier. Turning him down was the right thing to do. And so I am encouraged by the fact that this tweet was ratioed. It has, let's see here. Yeah, so it was big time ratioed. But what's interesting to me is some of the comments, and I'll read one of the comments for the sake of time. Somebody says, I wholeheartedly agree with Peter Hotez. We don't want to waste our time debating deniers and conspiracy theorists. They just want to drain our energy. Forget them, and we can move on. That is what Peter is doing. A smart move and right decision. And of course, that comment was ratioed as well. But again, it speaks to what we were talking about earlier with regard to the expert class and them kind of setting the tone for what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is good to talk about, what is not good to talk about. To the extent that you have somebody like RFK, who is credible, who is competent with regard to vaccines. He doesn't have any kind of space in the mainstream kind of public stage because he's not saying something that goes along with the narrative that is being pushed by the elitist types, by the establishment. And the Kennedys have long been anti-establishment. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I wrote an article. It was media runs be suspicious of debates with Joe Rogan narrative. And I wrote a whole article about it because that guy retweeted, I had 3 or 4, but it's up to like 10 now. He just kept retweeting mainstream media. They rolled out the same story in the same day. It's like, don't debate Joe Rogan, be suspicious of debates, don't debate. He literally, like all of mainstream media, Washington Post, Houston Chronicle, they all did that. And I want to say, I'm not telling people to vote for RFK or trust everything he does. He's a politician. You shouldn't. But here's what I will say. He is a threat to the big pharma narrative because he's not running around saying the COVID vaccine killed everybody. Like the people like that are like the controlled op of like calling everyone racist or whatever. Now you just look crazy and nothing gets done. He's not saying, oh, everyone's going to get hurt. He's just telling you the truth. He's saying in 1989 or the 1980s, they passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. So now big pharma under childhood vaccines, they have no liability for side effects, injuries, and deaths. The reason Trump Operation Warp Speeded the vaccine for his pharma friends was because if they rushed it through the PrEP Act, which was the emergency, COVID emergency, now they have no liability. So this is the narrative that wins the culture. It's not, everybody's dying. Like everyone's clearly not dying. Obviously, people do get side effects and injured, and the media is lying about it, but it's not as small as the media is saying. It's way bigger, but it's not as big as like the biggest fear monger. It's just not true. You know, it's like saying eating McDonald's, like you're going to drop dead tomorrow. Like, no, you're not, you know, it's just not as healthy as like an apple or something. But the truth is like, we need to get this stuff done. And RFK's going there. Trump's not going there. DeSantis kind of goes there, but like RFK full-throated explains it perfectly with no emotion, with no overstepping, just saying this is the big scandal that's been going on for 30 years. And a lot of people appreciate that. So all I'm saying is question people who are like all in his, you know, his whole agenda of like everything. But it's okay to understand that he is a massive threat on that topic. He just really is. He really is. He's doing it really well, and he's reaching more people than anyone else. And he's doing a way better job than DeSantis to like hit the culture, hit the masses, hit the podcast. Trump has his built-in base, but like, it's not a bad thing what he's doing. But I'm not asking you to run in and say, hey, let's take away all our guns for climate change. Like, you use you're a man or a woman, but God put you here not to cave. You know what I'm saying? It's not like that's what men used to do. If a politician, let's just lay over because he's our, no, stand up for what you believe in. Tell RFK if you disagree with them, and have that same energy with Trump and DeSantis. I just always have to say that because every time I speak, it gets misconstrued now, like as if I like a quote from Malcolm X. I must agree with his whole life. It's like I don't even know the guy's life. So, I do think that he is a massive threat on that topic, though.
Yeah, my point in bringing up that tweet though is to see the people in the comment section basically validating what was it Dr. Hotez was saying, and they're doing so by using words like denier, conspiracy theorist. And this is what I mean when I say that the left controls the narrative of the middle, because they want to frame once again their political adversaries, their philosophical adversaries, their theological adversaries. They want to frame their adversaries as being the this kind of straw man of what it is that they're trying to fight against, and they want to turn the attitude and the attention of the apolitical middle against their political adversaries by saying, see, these people are conspiracy theorists, they're vaccine deniers, they're this and they're that. They have no business having a say in the trajectory of our country and the health of our country, so on and so forth. And as a result, like, America is fatter, it's dumber, it's all the things. Like the decline of Western society is a result of us listening to the so-called expert class. And the fact that people don't see that, they don't see that connection, I think is very troubling.
The left is tricky with their terminology, and I feel like the right has trouble countering it, but I've seen better stuff. I'll give you my counter for the anti-vax word, because they actually have defined in a dictionary that anti-vax means you're against mandates. Even if you got every vaccine ever and you just think they shouldn't be mandated, they can technically call you anti-vax just because of that. It's insane. And then here's the big scam. And then the social media companies will be like, we can take away anti-vax comments. So they broaden the brush of what the word means. They say it means anyone against mandates, and then they get to take your video down. It's very diabolical, but the right doesn't dissect it that hard. So here's my anti-vax counter. Chad, do you like grapefruit juice?
Could take it or leave it.
Apple juice?
Could take it or leave it.
Do you like all juices ever made?
No.
You're anti-juice then, bro. You're anti-juice because if you don't want everyone, whenever we say, if you won't drink whatever juice I put in front of you, even if you're full, so it's like this idea that if you don't get everyone ever and agree with everyone, what a great role for the vaccine industry that they are protected from liability, so they could shoot millions into kids and have no liability for side effects, injuries, never have to pay $1 for it. Under an emergency like the COVID vaccine, they classified the mRNA shot as a vaccine because it's protected by the PrEP Act. So now, no matter how many people get hurt or have side effects, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson won't pay $1. Then the social media companies and the experts call everybody crazy that has a suggestion, like as if even if everyone was good in the past, everyone that they put out is just going to be great. Every car Toyota makes is going to be perfect. There's not a single thing in this world that it just happens 100% of the time perfect and you can't critique it. The whole word is fake. But how I just made that anti-juice or anti-pill, if you don't take every pill every... Yeah.
Did you say anti-Jew or
no,
anti-juice?
Juice. Okay. like apple juice, orange juice. I know what that word, like depending on your accent, but anti-juice or anti-pill. Like if you don't,
I thought you were getting anti-Semitic on me.
No. If you take, they'll chop it out of context though. But if you're, they do that with race as well. It's like if you don't like George Floyd, you're a racist. If even if you do everything for Israel, if you criticize George Soros, you're an anti-Semite. So technically it kind of fits because that is the scheme with everything. But especially with vaccines, they have a very, it's gotten a lot of like segue because it's like, oh, well, polio. And it's like, I'm just saying you don't take every pill all the time, and you know, if one pill fails or whatever, it doesn't make you anti-pill. So that is a way of kind of breaking it down where people are like, no, that makes sense. It's like, I'm not anti-pill,
Mhm.
but I don't think everyone's good. I don't think everyone's necessary. I know
Right.
everyone's not necessary. So why wouldn't that be true with the other pharma industry that has even more protection? And when you watch a commercial, you could watch all these side effects. They have to name the side effects because they have liability if they don't. With vaccines, they don't have any for most
Mm.
of them. So the how I explained it, RFK does a great job too. But you know, the right seems like they don't know how to counter it, or they just take the most extreme opposite angle to the point where it almost seems like nobody's listening because they know it's not true. They're like, I had 4 vaccines as a kid, I'm fine. It doesn't mean no one's getting hurt from them. Obviously, people are, but it, like when you just say like things that are just catchphrases and not explain it, you want to always try to explain it so someone on the fence will be like, no, that makes sense. So I see that with those narratives that it seems like the left has really thought out how to censor people and control stuff, and the right figures it out like 50 years later and
But
then
let me ask you this
freaks
though.
out. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Like, so by trying to articulate how you're not in fact anti every vaccine, are you still not playing into their narrative? Because shouldn't the argument be, well, what's so wrong with being anti every vaccine to begin with? You know what I'm saying? Like, should we not go for the jugular in terms of saying, like, you know, who decided that being against every vaccine is a bad thing per se?
Well,
Am I just
RFK.
naive here, or?
No, I mean, there's definitely different methods or strategies, I think,
Mhm,
to counter. Like RFK will say, I'm for safe ones. And then they'll ask him which ones are safe. And he's like, well, they've never been double placebo tested, you know? So he
mhm,
just does a workaround. To me, it works well because it's like, you know, but yeah, I mean, there are people, even with the COVID virus, et cetera, they'll be like burden of evidence is on your side, not mine. So instead of being like, to me, it's just like, I don't hate every fruit juice or
mhm,
pill, but also I don't really take pills, but I'll take antibiotics. So I don't do it as like I hate them all or I like them all. It's just like I don't have enough education
mhm,
personally to, like, if someone were to bring up this vaccine or this one, I don't have the knowledge to really go on it. I only know certain things. So I guess if I was a full blown scientist who had evidence that none of them, worked,
mhm.
then it's an easier thing for me to say. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's
and that's the
another
point.
strategy too.
No, 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 that's the point, because it's like, I feel like by going on this tangent of how, like, well, I'm against, like, the forcification of every vaccine, and like I feel like that can lead this kind of room wherein you kind of yield the premise of the narrative to the left, or whatever you want to call them, where it doesn't allow for someone who is competent and credible on, the topic, to come along and say, well, actually, none of the vaccines are good, and here's why. You know what I mean? So I feel like we should always leave room for that, and not really just give the narrative or the premise of the narrative to the people who are wanting to say everything is anti this and everything is anti that. You know what I mean? But I get your point, and I actually agree with what it is you're saying. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I guess it also depends how much power or leverage you have, and like how hard can you go at it. Say for
Right.
example, Candace Owens, she said at the Daily Wire, she knows that they'll produce a doc for her and get the distribution without, even if her YouTube goes down, she'll still be able to do it. So then she puts out a documentary questioning all childhood vaccines, right? She did that because she knows a lot about it. She researched it and she goes hard at it, and she doesn't mince her words. That's her strategy, kind of similar to what you're saying. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's
Mhm.
effective. With me, it's like, I guess it's just the type of person I am, where I always think about how to word it, and I'm pro question everything that they're doing to children,
Yeah.
including circumcision. I think that's just been status quo in America for a while, but I don't think people have really thought about it or questioned it. It's one of these things that it's just what we do. We chop part of the dick off of the kid, and then we shoot 15 vaccines into it, and the HPV vaccine, and it's like, it's pretty insane. It's very
Mhm.
insane. I'm not telling people what to do because I haven't researched it enough to if I did, I'd tell you exactly what I think, but I don't know enough about it. But I think all of it should be like the fact that parents aren't questioning that and they're crying about 2020, like, oh, big pharma scammed me. Who saw that coming? Like, maybe you should have thought about circumcision and childhood vaccines and at least educated yourself and had the conversation on it with your kid instead of just trusting the expert class, because that's exactly what the elites are doing that you're so mad at. They trust the expert class and then you get mad, but you also do that for numerous topics as well. And someone said that Jesus was circumcised. In the Bible, they also constantly talk about circumcision of the heart. I'm not sure if his penis was chopped off, but if you think it was, I mean, it's a different biblical debate. But, I'm just saying, all I'm saying is revisit it, question it, and do not just defer it. But I think what you're saying is totally valid, where I don't poo-poo the full-throated approach. I guess as long as it's accurate. If you're a scientist or educated like Candace and it's extremely accurate, nothing wrong with it. I guess my issue is more with people that are so sloppy with it. If you come that hard, you got to come correct. You don't want to make like 15 inaccuracies, because then it makes everyone look stupid. So
Right.
I think there's a place for both strategies for sure. You're right though.
Yeah, that's called journalistic integrity. I like it.
Yeah, man, it hurts me, man, when I see certain stuff and I'm just like, oh man, because then that's what gets the attention, and then the left goes, look, it's obviously wrong, and that becomes the false circus where you're like, I said something about vaccines on Twitter yesterday about like the liability. It's just straight facts about how it works in the legal system, and that some libertarian guy was like, that's actually a good take. I've never heard, they've never heard that before, because it's usually like, this is killing everyone at every second, or it's like, it's the greatest thing ever and it's making you stronger. It's like, if you get 18 boosters, it's like, there is no, that's why RFK is so dangerous in my opinion, because he's very good at like calmly explaining it. But he's been front and center in that topic for a long time, and it's interesting to see it go mainstream now because he's running for president. I've followed him for years, watching him get like a little bit of attention, and now to me that's the angle he's a threat on. Everything else, maybe he does other stuff. But any last words, my brother? It's always a good conversation. Appreciate you being here, and I like when you challenge me as well. It makes me think.
Yeah, it wasn't so much a challenge as much as it was just a question. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on the show as always, and can't wait to be invited back for sure.
Where can people find you if they want to follow you on socials or follow your career / knowledge?
My endeavors. So yeah, you can find me everywhere. YouTube, IG, and Twitter, all at Chad O. Jackson. So that's where I'll be.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Dream Rare Podcast. I'll probably take a break for the weekend. Thank you to everybody watching the shows, checking the links, all that. God bless you guys. And I'll have on some more guests next week to break it up. Thanks, Chad. It was awesome.
Peace. Thanks.
Hey, what's going on, my friends? Just a few ways to stay in touch and support if you'd like to. The first way is dreamrare.com. We have blue beanies, black beanies, pink hats, other colored hats, freedom versus tyranny shirts, stay blessed long sleeve, God is great long sleeve, and lots of more cool items coming soon. Dreamrare.com. Check out the shop to support. Everything's made in the United States. Handpicked by me. Patreon.com/raretalk. For $5 a month, you can help support me. Support the show. If you haven't noticed, unlike other channels, I don't work with very many sponsors, sometimes none at all. And part of the way I'm able to do that is with the dreamrare.com shop and patreon.com/raretalk. So thank you guys for keeping this show free, unimpeded, uninterrupted. I'm forever grateful. My free email list is stayintouchwithme.com. So check the links below in the description, or just type in on any browser, stayintouchwithme.com, all one word. You'll find my email list, put it in there, and it's the least annoying email list you'll ever be on. I barely use it because I don't like getting emailed every day or every week. It's annoying. So I don't do it. Stayintouchwithme.com. It helps me take back some power away from big tech. Telegram, t.me/dreamrarechat or @dreamrarechat. Due to censorship, I post all my live stream and videos there. Sometimes I have some bonus content, and I try to give people a heads up when Facebook or YouTube won't. Dream Rare Chat at Telegram. My Instagram is @dreamrare. Thanks for everybody following there for shorter content. And dreamrarelinks.com, that's dreamrarelinks.com, has all my stuff. My podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, my music on Spotify and Apple, my Rumble page, my BitChute and Gab page. All my links are found at dreamrarelinks.com. Thanks for watching, folks. God bless you. You already know I'll be back with more content soon.